Welcome to The Profitable Web Designer, a podcast for web designers who want to work less and make more money. I'm your host, Shannon Mattern, founder of the Web Designer Academy, where we've helped hundreds of web designers stop undercharging, overworking, and create profitable, sustainable web design businesses. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Profitable Web Designer podcast. And today I am joined by Jenn Zellers from Visibility Ecosystem. And we are here to talk about all of the ways that you can market yourself without social media. Jenn and the Visibility Ecosystem team help business owners just like you create sustainable, stressless marketing systems that help you grow your business and generate sleaze-free sales. And you know that I'm all about that here at the Profitable Web Designer. So Jenn, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Shannon. I'm excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's start off with you sharing a little bit more with our listeners about your background and really what led you to create the Visibility Ecosystem.
Yeah, so I've been in online business for about 10 years now. Gosh, that's scary to say. And I've been speaking on summits and podcasts since 2015. And I am actually in the process right now, as of this recording anyway, of hosting my 6th summit. So I've kind of been around the block on speaking and collaborations and that kind of thing. And I've just realized that it is the best way to market your business, not just in the moment, but also using it for your marketing assets so that you don't have to be tied down to social media as your main marketing platform.
I love that. And we were chatting before I hit record, or in our first take, because this is take 2 of our interview. We were chatting about how you've never been a social media person. I've never been a social media person. It just doesn't, like, I know the way some people feel about Instagram, like it's second nature for them to create content there. And it is absolutely not second nature for me to create content there, but for me to do a podcast or have a conversation or speak on a summit or anything like that just feels so natural to me. So I love that you're here to talk about this. And I want to go back to 2015, like, what kinds of things were you speaking about back in 2015? I know we have been in each other's orbits for 10 years at least, but what types of things were you speaking about when you discovered, oh, this is the way to market?
Yeah, so back then, it was a couple iterations of my business ago. My husband and I were running a business for creatives. And so like kind of how to be creative in limited amounts of time and resources and stuff. And so I was talking about stuff like that. And that was also morphing into like how to creative business and that kind of thing. So back then that was what I was talking about. But business has always, as a whole, been kind of my thing, I guess you could say.
And so how did you even stumble upon speaking at conferences and summits or anything? Like, what was that journey like for you back then?
So that's actually been like speaking and performing, so to speak, is something that I've always done. Like I was an Irish step dancer as a kid. I love doing plays. Like acting's kind of my side hobby. And my husband and I actually, funny story, met as co-hosts of the evening radio show at college. And so speaking's been part of our story for literally as long as we've known each other. And my husband is actually a public speaking coach. So he teaches at the university level and he's coached competitive public speakers like that go to nationals and stuff like that. And so he's got a really deep knowledge of speaking. And since I've got the business side, that's all kind of come together. And that's how we've ended up kind of honing in on speaking and that kind of thing as our main thing. And I just love speaking. Conversations are such a better place for me to start a marketing, like not campaign, but to create my marketing assets, I guess is the better way to say it, because you're going to ask me questions that someone else isn't going to ask. And I'm going to be able to take those and put them out there and answer questions that someone else doesn't even know that they wanted to ask. But then they go, oh my gosh, that was the answer I needed. And so that's what I love doing for all my clients too, is giving them those kind of questions that they can get, give the answers to, and turn them into marketing. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, I love that so much. And I find it fascinating that you're like, oh, I was a performer as a kid. I do these things. My husband is a competitive public speaking coach. And we both love this channel of communication and marketing, but I would say I am the opposite of that. I did not want to be on any type of stage in any kind of way whatsoever. I was forced to take a public speaking class in college for my communications degree. And I remember being so nervous. And when it was time to stand up in front of the class, and I'm not talking like a lecture hall, I'm talking about like maybe 25 people in like the breakout room. I don't remember like the speech itself. I think I blacked out for that part of it. I remember standing up, I remember sitting down, and that's it. When I got into corporate and it was like I had to present in a meeting or do something, I would over prepare for weeks and months ahead of time and be so nervous. And so the fact that now I'm hosting a podcast, that I speak at virtual summits, I've spoke at several in-person events, but it had been like, took a little 5-year hiatus with COVID, obviously. And like, well, not 5-year, but it was just, you got used to doing things online. I spoke at an in-person event recently and all those nerves came flooding back, but way less intense than it used to be. But it's so interesting because I'm curious if a lot of the people that find you and come to work with you are like, yes, I don't want to do social media. I don't want to do intensive content marketing things, but also I am terrified of being visible, quote unquote, public speaking. So, what's your experience been with that?
Yeah, I've had a lot of folks who say, okay, I know I need to be visible, and not just for marketing as a whole, but for that confidence piece. My husband actually, when he teaches, because he teaches that speech class that you had to take that you didn't want to take, and he likes to do something with his students where he makes them do a speech every single day. But it's not a full speech, it's literally a 20-second talk. And he gives them a very simple prompt. So it might be like peanut butter or jelly. Which one is the one that needs to go thicker on the sandwich? Or dogs versus cats. And they just talk for 20 seconds. And his students have said that has been one of the most impactful things that they've got out of the class because they've built that confidence muscle. That's one of the things that we like to do with our clients. And that's one of the things that I find that podcast tours do, is give you that chance to be in a casual setting and build your confidence muscle. And the other thing is, like, I'm an extrovert. I love being in front of people. I love talking. I love being in big groups of people where I know that we have something in common. But a lot of my clients are introverts. And podcast guesting actually works really, really well for them because they're having that one-on-one conversation. It's not intimidating. It's not scary. They're just like, I'm just talking to Shannon, but I'm also talking to you, the listener. And so when you're able to kind of just ramp down the stress levels and the pressure, you're able to kind of find your flow and enjoy it a lot more. And you can forget that you're talking to the podcast listeners because you're just talking to the host. So yeah, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, or you're terrified of public speaking, but you know you need to do it, you can kind of build that muscle up slowly and find your rhythm and what actually works for you.
I love that. And full disclosure, Jenn has an offer called the No Fuss Podcast Tour. And I've been on your email list for 100 years. I don't even know. I've been on it forever. I get your daily emails. And it must have been last fall or winter, you sent out an email about this like podcast tour that you're doing. And I'm like, what is this? I need to know more about this. Because it's always on my to-do list to make a list of podcasts that have web designers as listeners, or that could potentially have web designers in their audience, and do all the research and write the pitch and reach out and just start being on more podcasts because I love podcasting. It's my favorite. I feel like it's so selfish of me to get to be like, I get to talk to basically whoever I want for an hour and pick their brain and ask them all the things that like I'm curious about, but I also know that my audience is curious about and just have a conversation and meet cool people. Like it's kind of my dream life. And the fact that I get to do this all the time is awesome. I also love the flip side of it, of like letting the host just ask me questions and I just get to like talk about whatever I want to talk about. And then I get to meet that person. And we know that we're both serving the same audience and how can we collaborate? And it's like, oh, I just made a new friend because I spent an hour with someone. So I love it, but I never prioritize it because it just sounds like so much work to like pull it all together. And I'd be like, well, I'll just find one at a time and then not make the list. And whatever happens, then I just don't prioritize doing it. But you had this offer called the No Fuss Podcast Tour. And I was like, that's a no brainer. Let me sign up for that. And then, like, you delivered my podcast tour. And I'm still working my way through sending all the pitches because I don't want all of the podcasts scheduled all at once. So I'm like working my way through it. But I just want you to know that it has been like amazing. And I want everyone listening to this who's ever considered pitching themselves for podcasts to work with you on that because you just take so much of the load off. So tell me more about how that offer came to be. Like, what were you seeing in with your clients, your students, the community, the landscape all around that you're like, this is what people need?
Yeah, so that actually came about because we originally had a VIP experience where I did the strategy side of things and like, here, let's find your profitable speaking topic and dial everything in before they then go work with my husband, Lucas, to do the speaking skills and create the presentation outline and stuff like that. And then we would take everything that we kind of learned about them and curated during that part and turned it into a podcast tour VIP day as the last part of that experience. But especially going into last year, I was recognizing people want done for you, but they don't necessarily want the giant packages as much anymore. Like there are still people who want to need that, but there are also people who need something bite-sized. And I said, okay, how can I, like, what I needed was all of that information that we gathered during that first part of the VIP experience in order to make a really effective podcast tour. But how can I actually make it more accessible and something that they can do a bit more easily without having to be on 2 to 4 hours of calls with us? And it kind of just came together that I was able to say, okay, this is the information I really need. I can let the rest of it go. And now we just have that one form that you filled out that usually only takes about 10 to 15 minutes if you've got everything together. Some folks are like, hey, I'm going to come back to it after I gather up some additional stuff, but it's not a big form. And then you fill that out and we're able to take it from there. And I've been so pleased because every single podcast where I'm like, okay, this feels really dialed in and I'm able to deliver that and set, like you said, a price that I feel like is a pretty no-brainer. And I've just loved being able to do that because, yeah, there's so many people who've said, I've been meaning to do this for 3 months, 6 months, whatever. And I just don't have the time. Or I could do the podcast tour research, but writing all the pitch emails just sucks and I hate it. And I don't want to be the one who has to hit send because I get nervous. And so it's been able to just kind of fill that gap that's been there. And I don't see, there are other people doing podcast tours, but not quite in this way. So yeah, it just kind of came together out of what I was hearing people saying and what I knew that we could deliver. And it's been great.
It truly was a game changer for me in terms of like, it just took so much off of my plate to be able to pull it together. And the questions you asked to put it together were ones that I would not have considered a lot of the things that you thought of in putting together the tour. So it was really amazing. And on this podcast, all of you who are my loyal listeners, thank you. I love you. You know that I'm all about relationship marketing and building relationships and making connections, not only with people who could become your ideal clients, but more importantly, people who serve your ideal clients in some capacity. And I invited Jenn to come on this show because I'm like, podcasts are an incredible way for web designers to get in front of their ideal clients. And I hear one of the things that I hear all the time from web designers is that they're like, okay, well, Shannon, I've done everything that you've said. I made a list of all of the people that I know. I'm sending the outreach emails like you tell me to, and I feel good about that. But I have hit the end, like, I don't like, this is it. I've exhausted my list. I don't know anyone else. Now what? And I'm like, well, now it's time to kind of go outside of people that you already know to people that you want to know and connect with them. And that's one of the reasons why I was like, you need to come on the show, because being a guest on a podcast, I think it's like one's like a few steps lower of a lift than being a summit like speaker, for sure. There's not nearly as much preparation that has to happen. But can you share like your perspective and thought process on like, if you were working with a web designer to get them on more podcasts, what would that look like?
Yeah. So I actually have worked with folks who are web designers on the No Fuss podcast tour. So
Love it.
I can actually speak from direct experience.
Yeah.
I do want to say one thing though. You
Yeah.
mentioned it's a lot easier, like a lower lift than a summit speaker. The other reason that I recommend starting with podcasts is because one, they can help you become a summit speaker, because a lot of hosts will end up looking at podcasts for their speakers, but it's also proactive. Most of the time, if you're getting invited to be a summit speaker, it's because you know the host already, or the host knows somebody that you know, or they found you through another speaking opportunity. But podcasts are an ongoing thing, and you know typically whether they're continuing or not as much as you can until they post a like, hey, we're ending the podcast episode. Summits, you never know if the host is going to do it again. So that's one reason that it's a lower lift, and it's a proactive way to actually get those speaking opportunities.
Oh yeah. And like podcasts are way more evergreen too. Like a summit happens from a start date to an end date. It's available for a short period of time. Still really amazing opportunity, but also not evergreen forever, ongoing until that podcast comes down, depending on how it's structured.
Sometimes I actually also work with clients still on evergreening their summits, because that's something that when I co-hosted with Krista Miller, I started doing that for all of mine, and I'm still doing that. And so, yeah, we're
going to have to talk about that.
Yeah. But yeah, whether or not the summit goes evergreen, you can still use those assets. So I will say that even if it doesn't feel evergreen, you can still use them even if it's not pointing to that summit. But as a web designer, when you're going on a podcast, you're not looking to target other web designers like I did for Shannon's podcast tour. You're looking to get in front of actual people that you want to work with. So one of my clients, Sam, she is a web designer for typically not just health and wellness professionals, but like chiropractors and dentists and massage therapists, other kinds of therapists, like that kind of person. And so she had a really specific type of podcast that she wanted to get onto. And she had been trying to find podcasts in that space before this. And she was having trouble. She could write the pitch emails, but like she didn't really want to. And so she actually ended up having me do her podcast tour. And I was able to go and find a good chunk, like I think it was almost 30 for hers. I always aim for 20 to 30 because that's a really good sweet spot. It's not too many that is going to be completely overwhelming, but it's enough that you can typically get booked on at least 5 podcasts through that. Because my folks usually have a 25 to 50% booking rate with my pitch emails. So we went and we pulled all of those podcasts for her. She did opt not to get the pitch emails, but came back for them because she found 3 months later, she still hadn't written the pitch emails because she had so much else going on. But I was able to find podcasts that she was like, oh, I don't know why I couldn't find this. So what we always do is we look first at the audience that you want to target. And then we not only look at the audience, but the types of topics that they're covering on that podcast. Because if they are targeting the audience, but they're not talking about something that can dovetail with what you do, it's not going to be a great fit. So that is something else that people often do is they go and they find a podcast that's targeting their audience, but it's not going to be a match for them and what they can bring onto it, because it needs to be a win-win for both the host and you as the guest. So yeah, when I'm working with web designers, we also try to get creative because, let's be real, most people don't want to hear about web design. They don't want to hear about their podcast. It's a big project. It's overwhelming. It's kind of scary. And they put it off. So what we do instead is we don't give them what they need, which is a new website. Because like for Sam, she's like, okay, what my clients are telling me they need is more clients. But their website looks like it's from 1995. And for her audience, that's pretty typical. But they don't think about the website as being the first point of contact with somebody. They don't realize that when someone goes to a massage therapist website and it looks so clunky that it's actually going to drive them away from going to that salon in order to get their massages. And so what we do instead is we focus on what do they think they need. And so rather than giving them what they actually need, we give them what they want. And then during that interview, we take those interview questions and we flip them so that that script goes from I need clients to I need a new website in order to get clients. So that way they get drawn in by the title of the episode because the title says, here's what you need to do to get more clients. When they listen to it, you start off with that and then start turning them so that their mindset shifts and they recognize, okay, in order to get clients, I need a new website. So that's typically how I end up working with my No Fuss podcast to our clients who are web designers.
That is so brilliant. And one of the things that we always talk about is that you're not selling a website, you're not selling yourself, you're not selling your skills, you're not selling SEO, you're not selling any of that. You're selling the outcomes and results that people really want, which would be getting more clients and even further than that, so that you can have the freedom, flexibility, and financial independence that you want, that you're like running this business for, or whatever their mission and vision is. And I think that you're connecting some dots for people in terms of some objections that they would have to going onto a podcast, to be like, who wants to hear about web design on a podcast? Or on the flip side, what if they ask me a technical question that I don't know the answer to, and I look like an idiot, and then no one wants to hire me because I couldn't answer this very specific question in the moment on this podcast interview? And it's real stuff that like we know holds people back. I mean, your person who wasn't sending pitch emails, yeah, probably because they're busy, but also probably because there's that fear of putting yourself out there in a risky public situation that we don't always realize that that's actually what's stopping us. And it's not that we're too busy, because if we really wanted it, we would make the time. And so I love how you really help them through the process, shift from like, figure out here's exactly who we're talking to, who we're targeting, what we're talking about. And you don't have to talk about the stuff that they don't even actually care about.
And one other thing is you mentioned that if you get a question that you don't know the answer to, and I've been gathering some case studies for the Speaker Success Stories podcast, like a private podcast that I'm working on. And I've been interviewing some of my podcaster clients, and a couple of them have actually specifically said, I had questions in interviews that I didn't know the answer to right off. And the way that I always recommend handling it is just say, that is a really great question. I don't have the answer ready at the top of my head, but I would love to get back to you and we can add it to the show notes later. Or if there is something that you do know that is related enough, you can go and say, that's a great question. I don't have the exact answer for that, but, and then flip it over to what they do know. And so that way you don't look stupid and you don't have to worry about looking stupid. be willing to acknowledge that you don't know, but you're going to go find out. And that actually can really build trust with the audience because you don't look like some robot who can rattle off everything. And like, maybe you can. Great. Awesome. Then you look like the expert. But it makes you look like a human being who, if you don't know the answer to something for their web design project, you will go find it out and make sure you're delivering the best thing that you can to them.
I love that so much. And I think from where I sit as a podcast host, when I'm in the host chair, I feel like it's my job to lead the person through like making them look the best that they can possibly look. That's what we want when we're sitting in this chair. We want it to be like a win-win-win. I want it to be a win for you. So if as the host, I ask my guests something and they're like, you know what? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I would so quickly pivot, move on, not put it all on them to, I don't know, like come up with an answer. It's not a test, it's a conversation. And so it's more like I'm curious about something and I might ask you a question that you don't have an opinion on that, or you don't know how to do it, or it's irrelevant to what you do. And it's my role to help you pivot away from that too. So I think if you've never been a podcast guest before, if you can just think, oh, like the host wants me to succeed too, this is actually like a very low pressure situation, then you can just kind of like take that out of your mind and just relax and let it flow.
Yeah. And you can always ask the host to edit it. And I will say there are some hosts who are not the greatest at steering interviews. You're a great podcast host and you can steer that and you want to make sure the guest looks good. Some podcast hosts don't think about that. And that's okay. But you as the guest can actually steer the conversation. Like that's one of the things Lucas tends to work with our clients on is how do you actually move the conversation the way you want it to go as the guest who isn't the one steering it. But that's also something that the podcast tour, like the No Fuss podcast tour, we aim to help with that. Because when we're writing those pitch emails, and even for folks who don't opt for the pitch emails, we are giving them 10 interview questions that are customized to that podcast. And so you can kind of steer the direction that you want the host to go by picking those 2 to 3 interview questions that you put in the pitch email. So the host immediately goes, oh, this is the direction that we're going to go. These are the kinds of questions I should ask. And they go off of that rather than you giving them a completely blank slate. They have to figure out what in the world do I ask them. And so you as a guest can actually take control of that and make sure it's going the way you want it to.
I love that. I love it when people do my work for me and make it easy.
Yes.
It's beautiful. And those are the truly like those are the pitches that I say yes to. Even if I don't necessarily always follow the questions, when I can tell someone actually researched the podcast, whether they're a listener or not, but typically they'll listen to an episode or get an idea. And then they're sincere about wanting to be on the show. It's not just like, oh, you have my audience. I just want to use you and move on. It's like they see a real synergy there and they send a great pitch. Like I will prioritize responding to those. And it doesn't take that much to send a good pitch because there are so many bad ones. There are so many terrible ones out there. My favorite are like, I saw your work on LinkedIn and I'm just like, you didn't because I'm not there. Delete, like, you know. So, yeah.
And that's the other thing is standing out as a podcast guest really isn't hard. Like both during the pitch process, because like you said, we focus in our pitch emails that we write for clients on the value that they provide and the fact that they're going to promote it to their audience because most people don't do that. So literally just going and sharing the podcast episode with your audience, even just one time, but with my clients, I'm recommending put it into your content bank, rotate it out every so often, whether it's once a year, once a quarter, and tag that host. Like they're going to remember you and they're going to recommend you to other people too.
Yeah. And what would you say to someone who's like, I don't have an audience. I'm just a web designer. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to have an audience. You probably have more of an audience than you realize, but in that case, just focus on other ways that you provide value. And you can go and provide value in multiple ways. It might be that you connect the host to somebody else and you say, okay, so after this interview, I have someone I think would be a really great guest. Would you like an introduction? And you can do other things. Maybe you go and recommend the host as a speaker on a summit or something else. There's so many ways to provide value that doesn't have to rely on your audience. And if you do have an audience and it's just not big, that's okay. Like, it doesn't need to be huge. That's usually good podcast hosts anyway. That's not what they're focused on. Like, there are some podcast hosts. I had one client who emailed me back after she started pitching and said, I just sent out one of the podcast pitches that you wrote for me. And they said, yeah, we'd love to have you on. The fee is $1,997. Those are not the podcasts you want to go on. Those are not the hosts that are focused on the value. But if they're truly focused on providing value for their audience, you coming on is doing that for them, as long as you're presenting the right kind of topic. So whether or not you have an audience or anything like that, then you can still provide a lot of value.
Oh my gosh. And I was just thinking, if it was me and I was a web designer being interviewed on a podcast for running your dental practice or whatever, growing your dental practice, and once that interview was published, I would use that and reach out to all of my clients to be like, hey, I was on this new podcast. I know you're not necessarily in dental, but a lot of the things we talked about might really resonate with your business. Check out this podcast. And if you know any dental owners, please feel free to share this episode with them so that they can go check out this podcast. The host was great. And you can just use that as a way to give something to your clients. That's one of the strategies we teach in the Web Designer Academy all the time with outreach. It's not always asking for something. It's just adding value to your current network, and giving them a podcast that you have been interviewed on is an amazing way to provide value.
Yeah, especially if it's something like, hey, how to use it in order to grow your practice. Because yeah, there may be some stuff specific to dentists, but your chiropractor practice can probably use that too. And like you said, going and having them share it with friends, it makes them look really good. So that way, and you can say, if you share this with a friend and they happen to end up deciding to book me, I get to give you a referral fee. And so it's a double win for everybody involved. The host is happy because they're getting more downloads. You might potentially get a new client, or that client goes, actually, it's been 3 years. I really feel like my website could use a refresh. And they reach back out to you. And so, yeah, there's so many ways to do it that it doesn't have to be email a list as a big broadcast.
I love that. And I think that that's kind of one of the why podcast guesting is, I don't know if it is, but it feels like an underutilized strategy for service providers who need a low volume of clients. They don't need to build a big audience. They don't need like that many people listening. And so they don't even think of it as a strategy because they're like, well, I'm not trying to get in front of that many people all at once, but it's such a huge opportunity to position yourself as an expert, to get people to hear what it's like to see you in your element and like talking about what you're passionate about. And then you don't have to get that many people listening to it for it to have a big impact.
Yeah. And the other thing is, as you're sharing it, one thing I've been hearing lately from a lot of podcast hosts is that if they have a mix of solo episodes and guest episodes, a lot of the times the guest episodes get lower download numbers. So if you are able to actually get higher download numbers by sharing it directly with clients or their friends or sending that to your email list. I even have some clients who, because like you said, it builds that authority and that trust with people, they put podcast episodes that they really think showcase them in the best light in their email nurture sequences and things like that. And so if you're able to increase those download numbers on a guest episode, it's also going to stand out. So,
oh my gosh, it's like someone, we're creating uber professional free content for you to go market your business. That's what I love about being on other people's podcasts. But it's like, oh, here's an asset that the podcast host created for you that makes you look like an authority, that it's just amazing so many ways around. So I know I can't say enough about how much I think all of our listeners should consider being a podcast guest. Tell us more about how you work with people, how you can help them, and where's the best place to get started with you.
Yeah. So I work with clients. Typically, we start off with a no fuss podcast tour. And that just means literally you go, you book it at the checkout, and then the system automatically sends you that intake form link. You fill that out and take it from there. And that's literally all you have to do is fill out that form. And then I go and I take everything that you sent in that intake form, synthesize it so that I go, okay, these are the exact kinds of podcasts that we're going to look for. These are the kind of topics that we're going to be including. And then I go and I find those 20 to 30 podcasts so that you have that base to start with, whether you do like Shannon's done and do it in smaller batches. I have some clients who send out all 20 to 30 in a week and just do like 4 or 5 a day. Some people do a larger batch, like 10 of them, until they've booked a certain number of podcasts and then they hold off. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that people do it depending on their schedule and their capacity and things like that. But it's a really low-lived way to get started with that and to just jumpstart your visibility, because it's proactive, like I said before, and it does start getting you those invites. Sometimes the host will get off and say, hey, I need to hire you, or hey, I would love to have you come in and go even deeper in my program and talk to my clients about it. And then they may end up hiring you. So there's so many ways that it can expand beyond just that one podcast episode. And then one thing that I also thought about as we were wrapping up that last little segment is you can also ask the host for the embed code for their podcast player and create a little blog on your own site. No one ever does that. So, and that can go and then turn into even more collaboration opportunities. Because if they see that you're putting that much effort into a podcast episode, they're going to want to do more things with you.
That's brilliant. I love that idea so much. And so when you were sharing that and you're talking about, we'll ask you questions, we'll go away and find the best podcast for you. I know another objection people are going to have is like, but what if I don't have a niche? Because one of the things we talk about here at the Web Designer Academy is that you really don't have to have a niche to get clients and create a really profitable, sustainable web design business. So what would you say to someone that's like, okay, yeah, but I want to be on podcasts, but I don't just work with one type of client?
So there's a few different ways you can approach that. Sometimes I'll say, okay, you may not have a specific client, but maybe we focus on this particular type of thing, like a particular topic, or maybe we focus on this particular segment of an audience, and then you can actually go and rotate that out. So you focus on this segment of people in this podcast tour, and then we come back in the next quarter, we do a different segment, or we focus on a specific topic. So maybe you want to talk about how to use your website to build trust with people. And then in the next podcast tour, we talk about how to use your website to book more clients and things like that. And those are just really super general topics, but you can go and you don't have to niche down super hard. I've had clients who have a really, really broad niche, like women. And usually I get a little bit more details than that from them, but I can take the different things that you're saying in that intake form and we can find kind of a focus for that particular podcaster.
I love it. And then what happens then? How do you help people when they're like, oh crap, this is working? People are asking me to do things. They're asking me to speak at events. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to speak in public. I don't know. I want to participate in these things, but I need help. How do you help people in that when they get to that point with their visibility that they're being like sought after to contribute in a bigger way on a bigger stage, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. So, I mean, we do one-on-one consulting and coaching and stuff, but we're also, as of this recording, that isn't publicly launched yet, but we're working on a bigger VIP experience that we're calling the Everywhere Effect. So it makes you look like you're everywhere, even though you're actually able to sit at home in your comfy PJs and with a great book because you recorded your podcast episodes and your summit presentations and your guest expert appearances, and you did it once and now you get to keep using it. So we were able to work with folks on their public speaking and their interview skills, creating a content hub. So like that is one of the biggest things. We create that visibility ecosystem hub, and you can do this on your own. Like I prefer Airtable. You can use Trello, Asana, like whatever platform that you prefer, but creating that hub where you keep everything so you can refer back to it. If you have an interview, like someone comes to you with an interview proposal and you're like, okay, that's great. There's certain questions I want to ask, but I don't remember what they are. They're all in there for you. So there's a lot of ways that you can go and make sure that you're honing your skills and creating the systems that are going to support you to make it feel easy rather than overwhelming.
I could talk to you for another hour about this. I'm like, there's so many things that we like kind of scratched the surface on, but we didn't quite get into like evergreening. Like if you're a summit host, evergreening your summit content, which I am a summit host, that's probably like a really selfish topic that most of our listeners would not be, they might be into hearing about that, but also just creating the opportunities to go get in front of other people's audiences. But then the next level of that really is this ecosystem that you help people create to not just have it be like a one and done kind of thing, but have that stuff really keep working for you. So can you tell everyone where can they go to connect with you and get their No Fuss podcast tour scheduled like yesterday?
Yes. So I am everywhere at Visibility Ecosystem. I have an Instagram. If you DM me, I will get back to you, but I don't really post on there right now. I need to get my 9 grid up. I'm most active on Threads at the moment. And so I'm technically on LinkedIn sometimes, but usually Threads is going to be the best place to find me. And yeah, No Fuss Podcast Tours, really easy to find. Just visibilityecosystem.com/No Fuss Podcast Tour. And I'm sure we'll have Shannon's affiliate link down in the show notes. But yeah, I would love to chat. And whether you're thinking about booking a tour or not, just hit me up, DM me, email me, whatever you want to do to chat and talk more about what podcast tours and visibility could do to help you grow your web design business.
Amazing. Jenn, thank you so much for being here. It was so good to talk to you. And yeah, I just really appreciate the work that you've done for me on my podcast tour. And I think it's just like the first thing of many future things that we're going to get to talk about on the podcast and how well they work to help you meet strangers in a really authentic, natural way. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Hey, so before you go, quick question for you. Have you been listening to the podcast for a while and are curious if the Web Designer Academy is right for you? If that sounds like you, request an invitation to our next open house, where you'll get to attend our next live strategy call and then take a tour of the program with me and get all of your questions answered. All you got to do to get your invitation is go to webdesigneracademy.com/open house, fill out a quick form telling me more about your web design business and your goals. And if it looks like I can help, I'll send you a link to join us at our next open house. Zero pressure, zero commitment, just a chance for you to check it out and see if it's the right fit. To get the date and time of our next open house and request your invitation, just go to webdesigneracademy.com/open house. That's webdesigneracademy.com/open house.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.